And I think we're live. Hi everyone and welcome back. For those new here, my name's Nikki. I'm an author and editor and I post videos here about writing, editing, reading and all the other things I love. And it's the reading we're here for today. And it's the end of the month, so it's time to wrap up everything I've been reading during August. If you were watching my TV and film wrap up just now, you will have heard my phone going off multiple times. I have now taken it out of the room. It's typical because normally I could go the whole day with not a single beep or a single phone call. And so naturally, as soon as I started recording today, having forgotten to put it on silent, I suddenly started getting messages and phone calls all the way through the stream. But it's in the other room now, so hopefully we will not be disturbed in this stream. So let me just get rid of this and sit back a bit. There we go. Oops, hasn't gone. There we go. Come on. Hurrah! There we go. In the end, I got there. So, where were we? Books. So, yes, I've had a pretty typical reading month. I think about 18, 19 books that I've read this month. So, I'm well on the way with my Goodreads goal for the year. I'm certainly ahead of that. And I've already finished my own NJM Book Challenge 2021. So I won't talk about that too much here, but I have finished all 25 categories now, one book per category. And on my Instagram later, I'll share the little tick thing for that as well. So let's get on to the books anyway, because we're 2 minutes in and we haven't even started the books yet. I've been trying to read a few that I got for Christmas. Like this is last Christmas 2020. And because I've had a few NetGalley reads and arts and things this year, I hadn't got around to finishing all the ones I received for Christmas and birthday. And so I'm trying to catch up with those, obviously, before I'd like to clear last Christmas before I get to this Christmas, when I will get new ones yet again. So I managed to read a few of those during August. So I'm going to start off with those. Most of them are classics. So the first of those was Indiana by George Sand. Although I've known of George Sand for a long time, this was my first time actually reading any of her books. And Indiana is a story of a young woman who's she's been married off to a much older man, and when she meets this young guy, she begins this affair with him, and has trouble dealing with the reality, I guess, that how she feels about him is not the same as how he feels about her, and she's willing to risk everything for him, and he's not really interested in that. So that's the basic premise of the story. This was 4.5 stars for me. I really enjoyed it. You wanted to knock her head in a few times just because she was so foolish, but that's looking at it from a very modern perspective, of course. Like she's a fairly sheltered, naive girl, so she's not going to look at things the same way that we would now. But I definitely would like to read some more of George Sand's works, and I really enjoyed Indiana. Next up, I read The Good Soldier by Ford Madox Ford. This was 3.5 stars for me. It's a story of, again, infidelity, actually, amongst couples, but I just never really got into this one. It jumps back and forth in time through recollections and things, and sometimes that worked for me and sometimes it didn't. And I just never really engaged with any of the main players that I cared what was happening or going on to them. I've read some other stuff by Ford Madox Ford that I've liked more. I think it's just this story just wasn't quite for me. Dostoevsky next. I read Netochka Nezvanová. So this is an incompleted work. It's a very early work of his that he began before he was sentenced to Siberia. And when he came back, he never picked it up and continued it. So it's fragments in a way, or the fragment opening of the story that never got the ending. And this was 4 stars for me. There are bits I liked more than others. It got a little bit plodding here and there, then it would pick up again. But it did end with me wondering what would have happened next had Dostoevsky been able to consider continuing with the piece. And it does feature all the usual themes that you'd expect to see in Dostoevsky's work. So if you've never read Dostoevsky, this is not the one to start with. But if you have already read Crime and Punishment and all the other major works, then and you enjoy them, then you definitely want to check this out, just as a point of interest as an early piece of his writing. Next up, August, was The Frolic of the Beasts by Mishima Yukio. If you've seen some of my streams over the recent months, then you'll know I discovered Mishima last year and have become quite a fan, so I'm gradually working my way through all his books, currently available in English translation, until my Japanese is good enough to read something in the original, which is quite a way off yet. So The Frolic of the Beasts is another excellent story of his, and it's a 5-star read for me. He writes these wonderful character studies, particularly those that deal in depth with relationships, and also I guess two of his main themes are romantic relationships and family relationships, and also the conflict between the old and the new, because he's often writing stories set in the period of the sort of Meiji Restoration, moving into the modern, slightly more westernized era. If you haven't read Mishima, this is an okay one to start with. If you have read him, but you haven't read this book, I definitely recommend The Frolic of the Beasts. Next up, I read Scottish Folk and Fairy Tales, edited by Gordon Jarvie. This was a 4-star read for me. It's a collection of tales across a lot of different themes and different styles, gathered from different authors. As with any collection of this type, some of the stories I loved, some I wasn't as fussed about. But overall, it's a really nice collection of Scottish folk tales. So if you're into fairy tales, folk tales, then do check that out. The next two I'll mention sort of in tandem, because I like Zola. I read Thérèse Raquin when I was at school. And more recently, I decided to embark upon his Rouge en Maquette series, which is a 20-book series. I'd already read The Belly of Paris, and that's number 3. So I've gone back now and read 1 and 2. So The Fortune of the Rougons is number 1, and The Kill is number 2. So of the two, I liked The Kill more. That one gets 5 stars for me. Fortune of the Rougons gets 4 stars. That's just because the story in The Kill appealed to me a lot more. I engaged more with the characters and the action than I did with The Fortune of the Rougons, which felt a little bit slow and plodding at times. In some ways, I think it's maybe a good thing that I read The Belly of Paris first, because if I'd started with The Fortune of the Rougons, then I might not have been as inspired to continue the series, just because that one didn't appeal to me on its own quite so much. But I do plan to continue. I've put the next couple of books on my book depository wish list, so maybe I'll get some for this Christmas and I can continue reading some of those. But basically, I mean, this story, it's all a family drama set around the sort of Empire era, and looking at the rise of this family who, as we learn from the first book, started out just as this provincial family before gradually acquiring money and influence. And then we see different offshoots of the family in different books. So if that appeals to you, then do check out that cycle of novels. I also read Growth of the Soil by Hamsun. So this is a Norwegian author. And this piece it's kind of like a Norwegian version of the Icelandic independent people in some ways, because we have a main character who is, he just arrives one day and goes off into the wilderness a short way and stakes his claim to a piece of land and gradually sets up a farm. And the story, there's not a plot-ish. I mean, I think some people say there's no plot in this. That's a little bit unfair. Stuff happens, but it's more a sort of study of this guy who's been the pioneer, if you like, and his family and how his life develops on the land and his relationship with the land over the course of time, as he eventually marries and has children and other people move into the area. So it's a sort of slow, thoughtful kind of piece. I gave it 4.5 stars. It really is a sort of commentary, I guess, on man and nature and working together between those two parties. And it's, I don't know quite how to describe it. it's a descriptive piece. You get a real sense of place about it. Perhaps not quite so much as Laxness's Independent People, but still you get a real sense of the environment in which our characters are living. So if that appeals to you, do check out that one. And the last one from the Christmas reads for this month, I've still got about 6 to go, so there will be some more during September to November. But for this month, the final one is Carmen and Other Stories by Merimée. So this is the short story on which the opera Carmen by Bizet is based, and I'd never read it, so I was interested to do so. I gave the book 4.5 stars overall. However, I have to say Carmen wasn't my favourite story in the piece. I wasn't deeply engaged by it. I think it works better as the opera than it does as the short story, but some of the other pieces I did really enjoy. So if you like short stories, do check out Merimée's Carmen and Other Stories. So moving along, I've turned some pages to get to the next ones. Okay. Another book that I bought for myself just recently was How to Speak Any Language Fluently by Alex Rowlings. Now, if you've watched on my other videos, you know that I am a keen linguist and language learner, and that I've recently kind of upped my game with my language learning quite a bit. I'm working on it a lot more, with a lot more dedication than I have been for a few years. And this book was recommended by another polyglot on YouTube, and she speaks 12 languages or something, I think, and yet she said this book was useful and she learned something from it. So I thought, well, it must be worth checking out then. In the end, though, I'm only giving it 3 stars, and that's just because I think it's not aimed at me. I think it's aimed at someone who is new to learning languages, perhaps studied something at school and is now trying to pick that up again or start a new language on their own. And if you're in that position, this book is great. It offers loads of good advice, some ideas, things you can try, ways of approaching language learning. However, for me, when I've already studied many languages on my own outside of a classroom environment, pretty much I've come across all these ideas, all these practices before, and they've either worked for me or they haven't. So for me, I didn't really take anything away from this book. I kind of felt I'd seen it all, heard it all before. So it was a little bit disappointing. So I bought it expecting to get some great new information based on the review I'd heard of it, but that wasn't quite the case. So if it's for you as the right person who's new to self-study language learning, then it's definitely worth looking at. But if, like me, you're already an established language learner, then there's perhaps nothing new here that you can't glean from blog posts and other YouTube videos and things like that. The next one is a NetGalley read. So the first NetGalley read of the month is A Girl Made of Air by Nydia Hetherington. So this is a story that's kind of, it's a set in a circus. There's hints of magical realism, but not to the extent of the Night Circus or anything like that. And it's looking at regret about the past, and our main character has done something in the past that she now feels badly about, and she's trying to make up for it. Is essentially the main drive of the story. And obviously we've got the circus setting, so there's lots of circus related excitement going on in the background as well, and as I said, a touch of magical realism here and there. But essentially it's a story of coming to terms with the past, dealing with regret, and trying to make amends. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, do check out this book. It was a 4-star read for me. Okay, we're down to the last 8. We're coming towards over the halfway now. So sticking with NetGalley for the next few. So Speak Not by James Griffiths. This was a 4-star read for me. It's non-fiction, and it's looking at revival of languages. So in particular, it focuses on Welsh and Cantonese, though there are some chapters on Hawaiian and some other languages as well. And it's looking at what causes languages to die out, particularly in a political sense, what role politics plays in language extinction, and looking at how languages can be either revived or saved from needing revival before they get to that stage. So it was an interesting read. Some sections, the Welsh, for instance, I knew quite a lot about, because having been grown up in England, you did hear in the news about the Welsh revival and things like that. So that one I knew more about. I didn't know quite so much about the Cantonese and Hawaiian side of things, so I did find that really interesting to read why they're threatened and what's being done to try to save them. Sticking with NetGalley, I read The Fox's Tower and Other Tales by Yoon-ha. So this is a collection of little fairy tale-esque stories. I thought they were super cute. I gave this 4.5 stars. As I said earlier about another book, with a collection like this, there's always a few that you love most and some that don't appeal to you quite so much, and that might differ from person to person. But this is a really diverse and quirky and fun collection, so I think there would definitely be something here for everyone. So if you'd like folk tales with a bit of a Korean twist here and there, then do check out this book. And sticking with NetGalley still, I read a manga called The Summer of You by Furuya Nigasa. So this is a 5-star read from me. This is a really, really cute BL, boys love story about two friends who have bonded over movies. And one day one of them confesses his love for the other. And at first there's a little bit of tension, but then gradually over time the one who's being confessed to begins to question his own feelings and whether he doesn't perhaps feel the same way. And naturally at this point something tears them apart and they have to try to find each other again. So it's a slow, very, very much a slow burn, but a really sweet story, a lot of emotion and drama, beautifully drawn. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, do check out The Summer of You. Next up, I read an ARC. So this one is an ARC I received from Pan Macmillan, Australia. And the book is called Lakesdge by Lyndall Clipstone. And this is a 4-star read for me. This is a gothic, paranormal or fantasy, I guess more romance. It's got all the classic gothic elements you would want, a sort of house with a dark past, a mysterious owner, and as I said, this is a fantasy one, so we have some fantasy elements to do with magical powers and things that are going on, all tied up into this house that's on a lake, and there's something evil lurking in the lake. This is the first book in a series. I'm not sure if it's going to be a 2-book series or a 3-book series, but there definitely is going to be a sequel, at least one. And so it does end on a little bit of a cliffhanger. So we will have to wait to find out what happens next. But this was enjoyable. As I said, it's 4 stars. I didn't fall absolutely desperately in love with it, but I really, really enjoyed it. So it had good characters, interesting plot, ticks all the boxes, but still offers something fresh as well. So if you like those sort of gothic fantasy stories, do check out Lakesdge. Going back to NetGalley, I read Shadow Shinjuku by Takeshi. And this is a story that's kind of part magical realism fantasy and part gangster drama. Our main character is a member of a gang, Yakuza-like gang, and he also has this magical place where he can walk through what looks to other people like a mirror and end up in this special bar. And it turns out, I'm really trying not to spoil it too much as I say this, it turns out that there's a lot of secrets that revolve around his boss and his boss's daughter that he ends up getting caught in the middle of. So I won't say too much more than that because I don't want to ruin the story, but if you sort of like that sort of gangster Yakuza dynamic but with a fantasy or magical realism edge, then do check out Shadow Shinjuku. I gave it 3.5 stars. Next up, I read The Black Moth by Georgette Heyer. So this is a Regency romance, and this is actually Georgette Heyer's first book, which from memory, I think it said in the introduction she wrote it at 19. This is a 4-star read for me. I've read some of Georgette Heyer's other works and really enjoyed them, and I didn't dislike The Black Moth. It has a lot going for it. It has some really good characters, and particularly the description of the characters and their dialogue and the sense of character, the sense of uniqueness you get about them from the way they speak comes across brilliantly. What I would say about this book in comparison to some of her more mature works, though, is that it does meander a little bit. It took a long while for the main story to really get going. I kind of wondered what was happening for a while, and there's a lot of subplot and things that maybe could have been done away with. So it's perhaps not quite as finely tuned as some of her later work, and yet a lot of her trademark themes and her style are there. So if you already know Georgette Heyer's work, it's really interesting to check this one out. It features highwaymen. It's set a tad earlier than some of her other stuff. So there's plenty of swashbuckling and highwayman romance going on. But if you haven't read any of her work yet, there are probably better ones that you could start with. Next, I read Sense and Succubus by Adrienne Blake. So this is the second book in, it's a series, but they're not linked stories. They're basically Jane Austen retellings. So the first one was Pride and Paranormal, which I read back in June and gave 3 stars to then. And so this one, as the title would tell you, is based on Sense and Sensibility. And this one was a 4-star read for me. I think this one worked better in the adaptation than her first one. The characters came across better, and there just wasn't, there was a lot of unnecessary magic use just for the sake of it in Pride and Paranormal, whereas that was avoided in this one. So the story flowed a lot better, and you got more time to get to know the characters. They translated really well into the new setting, and it obviously ticks all the boxes, all the main plot points that you're looking for in Sense and Sensibility, but there's the fun paranormal twist as well. So I would definitely recommend, if you're a Jane Austen fan and a paranormal romance fan, checking out Sense and Succubus. Which brings me to the last book that I actually only read this morning. I've still got to write up the review for this one and the Black Moth, so I'll probably do those tomorrow, I reckon. So look out for those on my blog then. But this last one that I've just finished reading literally half an hour ago is A Gentle Noble's Vacation Recommendation, Volume 4. So this is a manga. It's by Momochi Mizaki and Sando. And if you've seen my earlier vlogs about the earlier volumes, you'll know it's kind of an adventure story. And we pick up where we left off in the last volume, as you might expect. And 11 takes a kind of front role, in a prominent role in this volume. So we get to meet him a bit more, find out a bit more about him. And we see Liesl and Single Stroke like liaising with him and bouncing off each other. So there's plenty of humour, some action again with some fighting, some adventuring, and it kind of paves the way for the next bit of story as well, which I'm interested to see how it will continue in volume 5. So on that note, I am going to close, I think. I am still busy reading, as I said, so I've got still a few more from Christmas that I need to get through, plus a few others that I've acquired through the year that I haven't read yet. I'm reading another one from NetGalley I've got here at the moment, so I might read that next. And then I've just recently, in the last week, received 3 more ARCs, 2 from Pan Macmillan, 1 from Harlequin, Australia. So I'm looking forward to reading those shortly as well. Those will be coming during September's reviews. So I will end there for now, but I look forward to talking to you all again at the end of next month to share what I've been watching and reading then. And of course, I'll be back earlier on in September with some more pre-filmed content, plus the next video in my language learning series. So I will close there, but bye for now, everyone.